In this video, we'll be taking a look at 3 college basketball games happening on January 16th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games. So 6 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 3 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Loyola Chicago versus Dayton. Dayton and Loyola are seeing a lot of each other this month, and honestly, this rematch feels like 2 neighbors who keep bumping into each other at the worst possible time for one side. For Dayton, that time is perfect. The Flyers walk in sitting at 13-4 overall and 4-0 in Atlantic 10 play, with that 4-game heater including the tight win in Chicago, a grind at Duquesne, and a comfortable one against George Washington. All of that while shorthanded again and again, which quietly matters when you are trying to project who can actually stretch a big spread at home. UD Arena is not just a building, it is a mood. 9-1 at home this season, with a fan base that treats a Friday night conference game on ESPN2 like a holiday, tilts a lot of small things in Dayton's favor, from energy on closeouts to how confident role players feel taking open threes. When you are asking a favorite to cover a big number, you want a team that does not sag when the bench comes in, and Dayton checks that box. Even with injuries, they stay organized, they do not panic when an opponent makes a run, and you can see that in how they handled Loyola's push on January 3rd and Duquesne's late charge on Tuesday. On paper, Loyola does have talent, and that is where this gets interesting. Justin Moore runs the show when he is available, Miles Rubin gives them real length in the middle, and there are plenty of wings who can knock down shots in theory. But the actual reality right now is rough. The Ramblers sit at 5-13. They have dropped 4 straight, and those losses are not the kind that build belief, including getting hit for 101-66 at George Washington and an 82-74 home loss to George Mason. That is a lot of scoreboard damage for a team that has to walk straight into one of the toughest A10 gyms 3 days later. The health sheet makes the hill even steeper. Loyola has 6 players on the injury report as questionable with undisclosed issues, and that list is not just end-of-bench guys. It includes Moore, Dominic Harris, Xavier Amos, Katie Dotson, Alexander Richardson, and Chuck Love III. Dayton is hardly spotless either, with Jordan Durkak, Malcolm Thomas, and Ameo Letang all listed as questionable and Jaron McKee out for the season after shoulder surgery. Here is the thing though, the Flyers have already proved they can function at a high level without pieces, because their core identity runs through structure, not just one star, while Loyola's depth gets stretched to the breaking point when multiple rotation guys are either limited or missing. Stylistically, this is a clash between a team that knows exactly what it wants to be and a team still trying to remember. Dayton's offense is efficient, sitting in the top half of the country in offensive efficiency, and they pair that with a defense that keeps opponents under 70 points per night on average. They are comfortable slowing the game just enough to squeeze you in the half court, then letting guys like Javon Bennett and Deshane Montgomery pick their spots to attack. Loyola, by contrast, is living in a world where they allow roughly 77 points per game, and their defensive efficiency is near the bottom of Division I. That is not a great recipe when you step into a hostile road gym as a double-digit underdog and you are trying to keep a game on script. You can also feel the psychological side stacking up here. Dayton already stole one in Chicago on a last-second Bennett layup, so the Flyers go into this with the quiet confidence of a team that believes, even if it is tight for 30 minutes, they will find the answer. Loyola, on the other hand, has to carry the memory of that collapse, then the 101-point hit they took in D.C., and then another loss at home. That kind of stretch does not usually turn around in the loudest road environment in your league. It can, sure, but you would be betting on an emotional outlier rather than the pattern we have so far. Honestly, the spread looks big for a conference game between teams that already played a 2-point thriller earlier this month, and that is what will scare a lot of people away. But that earlier meeting was the one where Loyola still had more bodies, the building was theirs, and Dayton was still sorting through its own early season rotations. Now the venue flips to UD Arena. The injuries have piled up more on the Loyola side than the Dayton side, and we have a clearer picture that the Ramblers' defense has not been able to travel. If this turns into one of those nights where Dayton's guards get downhill, the whistle favors the home team a little, and Loyola has to reach deep into a patched-together rotation. That big number can start to feel smaller very quickly once the second half hits. As our first pick for this matchup, the Dayton Flyers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The market total is sitting in that low 140s zone, which kind of tells you everything. It expects something competitive enough to avoid complete garbage time, but also respects the idea that Dayton prefers a controlled game rather than a track meet. So the question for the total is simple. Does this turn into a free-flowing, whistle-light game where Loyola hangs around and trades buckets, or does it look more like Dayton grabbing the game by the collar and dictating how long each possession lasts? Dayton's profile suggests control. They average just under 78 points per night, and they are not in a hurry. Their possessions are deliberate, and they tend to cut out the wild swings you see from teams that rely on chaos and constant pressing. Defensively, they hold opponents in the high 60s on average, and that combination usually drags totals down unless the opponent is also efficient and healthy. Loyola, on the other hand, scores in the high 60s but allows over 77 per game, and that gap often looks like games where they are chasing, not leading. It sounds like that might scream points, but the subtlety here is that a lot of those big numbers against them came when opponents were comfortable, not desperate. Here is the thing. When you are a heavy road underdog, down bodies, and facing an opponent that guards better than you do not really want a wide open game. Coaches in that spot often try to slow things down, run longer actions, and bleed clock, partly to protect their defense and partly to keep legs from completely going late in the second half. Given that Loyola's defense is ranked near the bottom nationally in efficiency, and they just gave up 101 to George Washington and 82 to George Mason, it actually makes more sense for them to try to sand the game down, not speed it up. Dayton also has a reason not to turn this into a sprint. With Durkak, Thomas, and Letang all on the injury report as questionable and McKee out for the season, this is not the kind of night where you want to gas your rotation-chasing style points. They know they have more a 10 games stacked right behind this one. So a sensible approach is to hit Loyola early, build a working margin, then lean on their half-court offense and defense to manage the game rather than constantly pushing pace. That kind of script often leads to a scoreboard that grows methodically, not explosively, which is sneaky important when you are betting a total. We also have a pretty clear pattern on the season to this point. Dayton has seen more unders than overs, with their combination of efficiency and tempo squeezing totals down even when they win comfortably. Loyola leans slightly to the over, but that is in large part because of how much their defense has bled, not because they are some run-and-gun juggernaut. In a game like this, where one side clearly has the defensive edge and home court edge, the favorite usually gets to decide whether the game becomes a high-possession affair or a grind, and everything about Dayton's current profile suggests they are happier keeping this closer to a slow burn than a fireworks show. Honestly, if you picture this one in your head, it usually looks like Dayton living in that mid-70s range, Loyola stuck somewhere in the low to mid-60s, with a lot of long, half-court trips, some empty possessions from a short-handed Ramblers rotation, and a home team that is more interested in banking a clean win than putting up a poster score. Could it break into a shootout if Loyola suddenly catches absolute fire from three and Dayton's role guys start drilling everything? Sure. But with the injuries on both sides, the way Loyola's confidence has been dented by recent blowouts, and Dayton's tendency to squeeze opponents in their own building, the more realistic script keeps this total under what the books are hanging. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Ohio versus Ball State. Ohio and Ball State roll into this one in very different moods, even if the records already told you that story before you saw a single highlight. Ohio sits at 10-8 overall and 4-2 in league play, and that is not an accident or a lucky week of hot shooting. This is a team that knows exactly what it wants to be. They have leaned into an attacking style, they share the ball, and they are comfortable playing in uncomfortable gyms, which is exactly what you get on a winter night in Muncie. Let me explain why that matters for the spread, not just the straight-up result. Ohio is scoring a touch over 78 points per game on almost 48% shooting from the floor, which tells you this is not just chucking and praying. It is organized chaos that usually finds a good look by the time the possession ends. Even when the Bobcats got smacked around a bit at Toledo in that 101-85 loss, the offense still showed up for long stretches. They just could not keep the Rockets from matching every punch and then some. Right before that, though, they stacked wins, including that 91-80 result over Buffalo where they turned the game into a track meet and still looked like the fitter side in the final minutes. And what really swings a spread on the road is whether your main pieces feel repeatable or streaky, and Ohio's core feels repeatable. With Jackson Pavlovetsky steering the offense, Aiden Hadaway giving them a forward who can score inside and step out, and Javan Simmons carving out space in the paint, they have a trio that travels well. A.J. Sheldon and J.J. Kelly on the perimeter, plus young wings like Jesse Burris and Kirkwani off the bench, mean Jeff Bowles has multiple lineups that can survive foul trouble without completely losing the plot. You can see it in the numbers, but more importantly in the way they handle runs. They bend, but they rarely look rattled. Now flip it to Ball State and you feel the spread tension show up fast. The Cardinals are 4-13 on the season and winless so far in conference, which already tells you that their margin for error is almost zero, but the context underneath that record makes things even trickier for them in this particular spot. They have some genuinely fun pieces. Armani Ziegler just dropped 30 at Akron. Davian Hill is fully capable of turning into the best guard on the floor for a 10-minute stretch, and Mason Jones, Preston Copeland, Cam Denson, and Devin Barnes all have moments where they look like future matchup problems. The problem is that, right now, too many of those flashes are happening in short bursts instead of full games. Here is the thing that really pushes this matchup toward one direction against the number. Ball State is sitting around 68 points per game and giving up just under 70, so their games end up in that grinding middle lane where one bad 3-minute stretch can swing everything. Add in that the Cardinals are dealing with real health issues. Local reports and national injury trackers agree that forward Caden Fish is out with appendicitis. Joey Hart has been dealing with a foot issue and is listed as uncertain, and Jawan Maxey is out due to illness, which pulls a lot of experience and spacing off the board for Michael Lewis. So the guys who are available, like Ziegler, Hill, Jones, Copeland, Denson, Barnes, and Cody Clancy, are being asked to shoulder a heavy load on both ends almost every night. Honestly, that is a rough recipe against an Ohio group that does not need everything to go right to stretch out a lead. The Bobcats are comfortable pushing in transition, they are strong enough on the glass to avoid getting bullied by this Ball State front line, and they have multiple creators who can force the Cardinals into scramble mode late in the shot clock. Ball State still has some home court juice in Worthen Arena, and there is always the chance that Ziegler or Hill strings together another big scoring night. But with the depth issues and the recent form, the pressure they feel if they fall behind by even 2 or 3 possessions is very real. On balance, the team with the healthier rotation, the more polished offense, and the better late-game shot creation tends to cover this kind of small road number, and everything about how these two have been playing points in that direction for this particular spread. As our first pick for this matchup, the Ohio Bobcats to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Ohio games this season have had a habit of turning into little scoring festivals, and that is not just narrative fluff. They are averaging more than 78 per night, they are shooting efficiently inside the arc, and even with a 3-point percentage that is not exactly lights out, the volume and pace mean their final scores rarely feel low. That 91 against Buffalo and the 85 in the loss at Toledo both landed in the same basic zone, which is, if you run with us, we will happily keep trading until someone blinks. Ball State is the more interesting side of this total conversation because their season-long scoring profile looks calmer on the surface, sitting in the high 60s, but the recent game flow tells a louder story. You have that 87-77 loss at Akron, where Ziegler's 30 were the headliner, but the bigger hint for the total was that Ball State was willing to keep pushing even when they were chasing the game. You also have earlier games where, against stronger opponents, the Cardinals ended up in the 70s in defeat because they simply had to speed things up to stay attached. So while the raw averages suggest a slower grind, the reality is that when they face better offenses, their path to hanging around usually runs through playing a little quicker, letting Hill and Ziegler attack, and trusting that Denson, Barnes, Jones, and company can chip in enough spacing to keep the floor open. Here is the fun part for a bettor who only cares about the total. The market number here sits in that mid-140s range, which is right in the window where one team getting into the mid-70s and the other crossing 70 can bust it open. Ohio's style almost invites that script. They push off misses, they are happy to take early offense if it is clean, and their defense is competitive but not so suffocating that it strangles the pace out of the game. Ball State's injuries on the perimeter and in the rotation hurt them defensively as much as anything because thinner depth often means more tired legs, slower closeouts, and more fouls late in halves when they are a step behind. Those are exactly the little edges that quietly stack points, whether it is free throws in the bonus or a couple of extra open threes in transition. There is a slight contradiction baked in here that is worth calling out. Ball State at home has had some lower scoring games, and there is always a chance the Cardinals try to ugly this one up to stop the losing streak, slow the tempo, and lean on the crowd to grind with them. But when you look at how Ohio games have played out against similar or better defenses, and how Ball State has recently been forced to play from behind, it is hard to picture a clean, low-possession rock fight from wire to wire. All it takes is one extended stretch where both teams find a rhythm. Ziegler and Hill are getting chances to attack. Ohio is running off misses, and suddenly you have a game that is living in the high 60s by the under 8 timeout in the second half, which is usually bad news for an inflated under ticket. So if you strip away the jersey colors and just think about the ingredients, you get an efficient road offense that is not shy about tempo. A home team that has been giving up points and occasionally matching pace when games get away from them, a rotation for Ball State that is missing key defensive pieces, and a total hanging in a range that can be beaten without needing a true shootout classic. That combination leans toward a game where both sides get their runs and the final score feels more like a Mid-American Conference game that people talk about than one that disappears into the box scores. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Colorado State versus Boise State. We open in Boise with a line that still treats Colorado State like they are walking into a haunted gym, not a winnable Mountain West game, and that is where this whole thing gets interesting for the side. Books have Boise State sitting as a mid-single-digit home favorite, around that 5.5 number, with Colorado State getting the points, and that price is leaning more on old stories about Extra Mile Arena and Boise's name value at home than what either team has actually shown in this year's league grind. Boise's record looks middling at 9-8 overall and 1-5 in conference, but the real story is the 4-game skid they are riding, where they have been handing out big numbers like free samples, giving up a triple-digit heartbreaker in triple overtime at San Diego State, getting run past by Utah State, knocked around by Grand Canyon, and then dragged through another high-scoring loss at UNLV. You do not need a spreadsheet to feel that kind of stretch. That is the kind of run where a tough defensive program quietly becomes the team everybody circles as a "we can get right against them" spot in the league. On the other side, Colorado State comes in at 11-6 under first-year head coach Ali Farakmanish, and there is a different energy around them. They built a 9-2 non-conference run, including that loud 91-86 win over previously unbeaten rival Colorado, where the Rams casually splashed 18 of 35 from deep, which is the kind of night that sticks in everyone's memory when you talk about their ceiling. Earlier in the year, their own notes had them assisting on 70.1% of their made field goals, third best in the country at that time, and sitting in the national top group in assist-to-turnover ratio. So this is not just a hot shooting team, it is a group built around ball movement, sharing, and making the extra pass until somebody is wide open. That style matters on the road because it travels better than pure isolation basketball, and it gives them a way to withstand hostile crowds and tricky rims by simply creating cleaner looks over and over again. Of course, it has not been all smooth for the Rams. They have had to absorb the loss of major contributor Kyle Jorgensen to a knee injury with no clear timetable on when he will be back, and that means they have had to reinvent some of their offense and a lot of their rebounding on the fly. Rashawn Bemba has had his own injury drama, battling through issues earlier in the season, but he is back in uniform and back in the rotation, giving them a strong physical presence again, the kind of big who makes everything on the glass just a little easier for the guards. That combination of having to adjust quickly, yet still keeping the ball movement identity intact, has given this team a bit of a hardened edge, like they have already lived through a mini version of March in December and January. Boise, meanwhile, is built on experience, and their roster really does look like the classic veteran Mountain West group. They have a cluster of guys with more than 500 career Division I points, the kind of core that usually means you know exactly who you are late in the shot clock. But this season they are doing it without sophomore guard Julian Bowie. He is on this year's roster, but he has stepped away from the team for the rest of the season for personal reasons after a family tragedy, and that leaves the backcourt thinner than it looks on paper, especially when foul trouble or fatigue kicks in. In a league where guard play in February and March normally decides who gets separation, having that missing piece can show up in weird ways, from late-game turnovers to simply not having one more shooter the defense respects. Stylistically, this matchup sets up like a tug of war between pace and precision. Colorado State prefers things closer to the mid-60s in possessions, a little more controlled, a little more deliberate, while Boise has been operating in the low 70s, closer to the kind of tempo where a game can suddenly feel like a track meet for a few minutes at a time. Here is the thing, though, when you combine a precision passing offense like the Rams with a Broncos defense that has looked more like a leaky faucet than a lockdown unit over this recent stretch, that extra speed can actually work against the home side. More trips mean more chances for Colorado State to run through their progressions, force rotations, and eventually find that one defender who is a step late or a half-second tired after chasing shooters off screens for 25 seconds. The market, as usual, is still holding on to history. Colorado State has not exactly loved this trip in the past, with just 3 wins in their last 13 visits to Boise, and that kind of trend tends to hang around in betting conversations longer than it probably should. But against the number, this version of CSU has been a very different story, covering in a big majority of their recent games, while this particular Broncos team has chosen a rough time to stumble, especially now that conference play has exposed some of their defensive and depth issues. So when you zoom out, what you get here is a line that treats this like a comfortable home win for Boise, while everything we are seeing right now suggests a game that feels closer to a one-possession scrap late, with the road team bringing better ball movement, cleaner shooting profiles, and a longer track record of outperforming expectations. As our first pick for this matchup, the Colorado State Rams to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. The projected total is sitting in that low 140s range, roughly around 141.5 points at most books, and it is one of those numbers that dares you to lean on old habits, Boise's former defensive image and Colorado State's slower tempo, instead of what both teams have actually been playing like this season. On paper, yes, the Rams are methodical, living in the mid-60s for possessions per game, but inside that pace they are quietly running one of the more efficient, high-leverage attacks around, scoring in the high 70s per night and allowing low 70s, with shooting numbers that put them near the top of the national charts as conference play kicked in. That is the kind of profile where a box score might not scream track meet, but by the time you add up how often they score and how rarely they waste trips, the totals creep up anyway. Their recent game log tells that story in plain language. 75-62 against Nevada, 70-60 at Grand Canyon, 80-70 with New Mexico, 70-62 versus UNLV, 79-69 at Fresno State. 5 straight games landing anywhere from the low 130s to the high 140s. Those results live right around this posted number, and that is before you sprinkle in the usual late-game weirdness that college basketball loves, the extra free throws in the final 90 seconds, the quick threes when a team is chasing 2 possessions with not much time left. Colorado State has already shown they can crank the volume up when the matchup asks for it, that Colorado game with 18 made threes being the loudest example, so you know there is a version of this team that turns a slow game into a surprisingly high total simply by shooting the lights out for one half. Boise's season has drifted toward another kind of chaos. Officially, they sit in the mid-70s for scoring and low 70s allowed, which on the surface sounds balanced, but the way they have been getting there lately looks less like a grind and more like a series of mini shootouts. That triple overtime thriller at San Diego State, the 93-68 loss to Utah State, the 81-66 conference opener at Nevada, the 75-58 setback against Grand Canyon, and the 89-85 overtime game at UNLV all point to the same pattern. Turnovers, foul trouble, and defensive breakdowns keep putting them in situations where both teams end up living at the line, running in transition, or trading open looks after a scramble, which is exactly how games sneak past totals that feel conservative at first glance. If you strip out the extra periods and smooth down garbage time, the underlying story is still the same. A Boise defense that sends opponents to the stripe often and gives up too many quality looks, paired with an offense that is efficient enough, at just over a point per possession, to hold up its end of the bargain. Team-level numbers have them around 72 possessions per game and a foul profile that swells free throw volume. And that combination is pure fuel for overs in this zone, especially when the other side is a high-skill offense that knows how to exploit rotations and mismatches. You can almost picture the flow here. Colorado State moving the ball side to side, probing until a shooter slips free, Boise answering with downhill attacks and free throws, and both coaches quietly frustrated that the defensive game plan never really clamped down the way it looked on the whiteboard. Add in the three-point volatility on the Rams side, the same group that buried 18 long balls against Colorado, and the emotional fuel of Boise chasing a badly needed home win on national television with FS1 cameras in the building, and you get a game state that is very friendly to points. Coaches will talk about toughness and getting stops, but both rosters lean offense first. Both teams have shown a willingness to foul when they are behind, and neither has consistently proven they can choke off scoring for 40 straight minutes against quality opposition. So when you match a pace profile that is a little quicker than people think, with efficient shooting and a foul environment that invites extra possessions and free points, it becomes much easier to trust that this number can be beaten by simple shot making and late-game chaos. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.